Abandoned at the altar, she ran to the countryside, until a wealthy widowed farmer found her, and Clara had been dreaming of this day for as long as she could remember. Ever since she was a little girl, she imagined walking down an aisle adorned with flowers, the sunlight streaming through the windows, and the gentle murmur of friends and family surrounding her as she promised her life to the one she loved. She had planned every detail carefully: the dress, the flowers, the music, even the little touches that would make the day perfect. Nothing in her mind could go wrong. For weeks leading up to the wedding, Clara had been filled with excitement and nervous energy. She woke up early, humming to herself, imagining how it would feel to hear her fiancé's voice as he said the words that would change her life. She imagined the warmth of his hand in hers, the shared glances that spoke of a lifetime of understanding, and the laughter they would share as husband and wife. Every moment seemed like a step closer to a beautiful dream, one she was ready to live. But on the morning of her wedding, a subtle unease gnawed at the edges of her joy. Her fiancé, Mark, had been unusually distant. He had brushed off her questions about the final details, and his smiles had seemed forced, as if hiding something she could not yet see. Clara tried to ignore it, convincing herself that the stress of the wedding had made him tired or distracted. After all, people sometimes got nervous before such important events. Surely, this was nothing more than a fleeting moment of tension. The ceremony hall was a vision of perfection. White roses lined the aisle, and soft ribbons fluttered in the gentle breeze from the open windows. Guests arrived dressed in their finest clothes, chatting softly and exchanging excited whispers. Clara could hear the faint laughter of children running around the garden outside, the clinking of glasses as the caterers prepared for the reception, and the hum of voices that mingled in an atmosphere of joy and anticipation. Everything was set for the most beautiful day of her life. Clara took a deep breath as she stood at the edge of the aisle, her heart pounding in a mix of excitement and nerves. She looked around at the faces of her family and friends, all smiling warmly, their eyes filled with love and anticipation. Her mother's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the lace on Clara's dress, while her father tried to hide the proud tear in his eye. Clara felt a surge of happiness and nervousness all at once. This was it, the moment she had waited for all her life. But then, as the music began to play and she prepared to walk down the aisle, a cold knot of fear tightened in her stomach. The place where her fiancé was supposed to stand, waiting for her with a smile, a nervous laugh, and open arms, was empty. Clara froze for a heartbeat, thinking it was some kind of mistake. Perhaps he had been delayed, perhaps he was caught up in last-minute arrangements. Surely he would appear any second. The seconds stretched into minutes. Clara's heart began to race, and a quiet panic started to creep into her mind. She glanced at the wedding coordinator, who shook her head slightly, trying to convey reassurance, but the uncertainty lingered like a shadow. Guests began to murmur among themselves, their voices low but tinged with confusion. Clara's friends exchanged worried glances, and her mother's face went pale. Clara's stomach dropped as the realization began to take hold. Mark was not coming. A wave of shock and disbelief washed over her. Her mind refused to accept the truth at first. This had to be a cruel joke. This had to be some misunderstanding. Mark could not have abandoned her on the day they were supposed to start their life together. But the longer she waited, the heavier the weight of reality became. The empty space at the altar was no longer just a gap in the ceremony. It was a chasm that reflected the betrayal she had never anticipated. Tears welled up in Clara's eyes, but she tried to hold them back, unwilling to break down in front of everyone. She could hear her own shaky breaths and the quiet shuffle of feet as the guests shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered their sympathy, while others looked on in stunned silence. Clara felt the heat of humiliation rising in her cheeks. She had been planning this day for months, imagining the joy and love that would fill the room, and now it was replaced by confusion, sorrow, and shame. Her mind raced through 1,000 questions. Why had he done this? Was there something she had done wrong? Was their love not enough? The questions were endless, but the answers did not come. Instead, she was left with an empty hall, filled with well-meaning faces and her own pounding heart. The betrayal cut deep, not just because of the abandonment itself, but because it happened publicly, in front of everyone she cared about. Clara knew she could not stay there. Every second felt unbearable, the air thick with the weight of disappointment and shock. She whispered an apology to her family, who tried to comfort her, but she barely heard them. The words of support felt distant, almost unreal. In that moment, she made a decision. She could not face the whispers, the pity, or the questions any longer. She had to leave, to escape, and to find a place where she could think, cry, and breathe without judgment. She left the hall quietly, avoiding the eyes of curious onlookers. Her wedding dress, once a symbol of joy, now felt like a shroud, heavy and suffocating. Clara walked through the streets, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Anger and sadness competed with disbelief, and a deep, gnawing loneliness settled into her chest. She had trusted someone with her heart, only to have it abandoned when she was most vulnerable. The betrayal felt like a wound that cut to the very core of her being. Clara wandered aimlessly through the city, the sounds of celebration from other weddings and parties mocking her heartbreak. Every street corner seemed to remind her of what she had lost, the dreams she had built, the promises she had trusted, the future she had imagined. With each step, the city felt smaller, more suffocating, and more filled with memories of her humiliation. She realized she needed distance, not just from the city, but from everything that reminded her of what had happened. Packing only a few belongings into a small suitcase, Clara decided to leave everything familiar behind. She did not have a clear plan, only a desire to disappear, to find a place where no one knew her, and where the wounds in her heart could begin to heal. She wanted a place where the past could not follow her, a place where she could start over, even if she didn't yet know how. Eventually, Clara chose to travel to the countryside, far from the bustling city streets, the curious eyes, and the painful memories. She imagined fields of green, quiet mornings, and the simple rhythm of rural life. She hoped that in such a place she could find peace, rebuild her sense of self, and perhaps, in time, trust again. It was not an easy choice. It was a leap into the unknown, leaving behind everything familiar. But Clara knew that staying would only prolong the pain, while moving forward, even into uncertainty, offered a chance at healing. As she boarded the train that would take her out of the city, Clara looked out the window at the skyline she had known all her life. The tall buildings, the streets filled with life, and the distant hum of traffic all seemed to fade into the past. For the first time, she felt a mixture of fear and hope. Fear of the unknown that awaited her, but hope that somewhere beyond the hills and valleys, she might find a new beginning. The countryside welcomed her with open arms, the air crisp and clean, carrying the scent of earth and growing things. Birds chirped in the trees, and the sun shone gently over rolling fields. For the first time in hours, Clara felt her chest relax, as if the weight she had carried for so long was beginning to lift. She walked along dirt roads, watching farmers tend to their fields, children play in the distance, and animals graze peacefully. The simple beauty of the countryside brought her a sense of calm she hadn't felt since before her life had been shattered. Though her heart still ached, Clara took a deep breath and allowed herself to feel a small flicker of hope. She did not know what the future held, but she knew that she had survived one of the most painful experiences of her life. And in the quiet of the countryside, she felt that perhaps, just perhaps, healing could begin. Clara's journey of self-discovery, resilience, and eventual happiness was about to start, not with fanfare, flowers, or celebrations, but with the quiet courage to face her pain and move forward, step by step, into the unknown. She was no longer just a bride abandoned at the altar. She was a woman ready to reclaim her life. Clara had arrived in the countryside with little more than a small suitcase and a heart full of hurt. The world here was different from the city she had left behind, quieter, slower, and alive in ways she hadn't known existed. Instead of honking cars and crowded streets, she saw endless fields of green, dotted with grazing cows and sheep. The air was crisp and smelled of fresh earth and wildflowers. For the first time in days, Clara felt a flicker of calm within her heart, though the sorrow still clung to her like a heavy coat she could not remove. She rented a tiny cottage on the edge of a small village. It was modest and old, with peeling paint on the shutters and a roof that leaked when it rained, but to Clara, it felt like a sanctuary. The cottage was surrounded by a small garden patch, where wildflowers grew in untamed beauty. Clara spent the first few days unpacking her few belongings, arranging them neatly and walking around the nearby fields. Everything was new and unfamiliar, and yet it felt peaceful. For the first time in weeks, she could breathe without the constant ache of humiliation pressing against her chest. Clara quickly realized that life in the countryside would be very different from the life she had known. There was no fast-paced schedule, no traffic, no endless responsibilities or social expectations. Instead, there was work to be done, simple, physical work that required effort but gave immediate, visible results. She began planting vegetables in her small garden, pulling weeds from the soil, and tending to the flowers that grew wild around the cottage. Every evening, she sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the distant hills, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. The quiet moments helped her think, reflect, and slowly untangle the knots of pain that had tightened around her heart. Loneliness was, at first, one of Clara's greatest challenges. The city had always been full of noise, chatter, and people she knew, even if she had sometimes felt invisible among them. Here, there were fewer faces, and everyone seemed to know one another. She would walk to the village market, where farmers sold fresh eggs, milk, and vegetables, and exchange brief greetings with people who were polite but not familiar. At night, the silence of the countryside seemed almost deafening. She would lie awake in the little cottage, the walls creaking with the wind, and remember her wedding day, the empty altar, and the look of surprise and sympathy in her friend's eyes. Despite the sorrow, Clara began to discover a strength she hadn't known she possessed. She realized that she could care for herself, that she could cook her own meals, clean her small home, and find joy in the small accomplishments of daily life. She learned to rise early, the sun spilling light into her bedroom, and to find comfort in the rhythm of the day. She discovered that she could plant seeds and watch them grow, that she could mend broken fences, and that she could carry firewood up the hill without complaint. In the solitude of the countryside, Clara began to understand that she was capable of more than she had imagined. The villagers noticed Clara's presence and slowly began to welcome her. She helped Mrs. Lawson, an elderly woman who lived down the road, gather herbs and prepare food. She fetched water for Mr. Harris, whose old legs could no longer carry heavy buckets. With each act of kindness, Clara felt a little lighter, a little more connected to the world around her. People began to smile at her as she passed, nodding in acknowledgement rather than pity. It was not the bustling friendships of the city, but it was genuine, slow, and real. These small interactions reminded her that the world still held goodness, even after the betrayal she had suffered. Clara also learned to appreciate the natural beauty of her surroundings. She would walk along dirt roads lined with tall trees, listening to the wind rustle through the leaves. Birds sang from branches above, and rabbits darted across fields in the early morning. Sometimes she would sit by a small stream that ran behind her cottage, watching the water glide over smooth stones, imagining it carrying away her pain with each ripple. These moments of quiet reflection brought clarity, and Clara began to feel a sense of peace that had been foreign to her in the city. Yet, healing was not linear. Some days, the pain returned with a sharpness that surprised her. A memory of Mark, the empty hall, the whispers of guests, it would all come rushing back. On these days, Clara would retreat into her cottage, sit by the fireplace, and allow herself to cry. She refused to judge herself for her sorrow, understanding that grief could not be rushed. Slowly, day by day, these moments of sadness became less frequent, replaced by a quiet acceptance that her life had changed, and that she could no longer rely on the people or dreams of the past. In time, Clara began to find small joys that she had never noticed before. She discovered the taste of fresh vegetables straight from the garden, the comfort of a warm cup of tea on a cold morning, and the satisfaction of mending her own clothes or repairing small things around her cottage. She learned the names of the villagers and began to feel a small sense of belonging. Clara also started to explore nearby fields and forests, marveling at wildflowers, the distant hills, and the endless sky. Each discovery reminded her that life could still hold beauty, even after heartbreak. One evening, as Clara was walking through the fields, she noticed a small family of deer grazing quietly near the edge of the forest. She stood still, holding her breath, and watched them. The gentle rhythm of their movements, the soft rustling of leaves, and the golden light of the setting sun created a moment of magic she would never forget. In that instant, she felt connected to the world in a way she had never experienced in the city. Nature's quiet presence reminded her that life continued, and that she could still find joy and meaning, even after loss. Clara's days slowly became filled with purpose. She set small goals for herself, planting a row of tomatoes, building a small fence around her garden, learning to bake bread from scratch. Each accomplishment, no matter how minor, gave her a sense of pride. She began keeping a journal, writing down her thoughts, dreams, and fears. Through writing, she processed the heartbreak that had once seemed unbearable. She realized that she was not defined by the betrayal she had suffered, but by the courage she showed in choosing to continue living despite it. The village itself, though quiet, began to feel like a small community to Clara. People looked out for each other, shared stories, and helped whenever they could. Children would sometimes run past her cottage on their way to school, waving and laughing, bringing light into her days. Farmers working in the fields would nod in greeting or offer her small bundles of fresh produce. These interactions, though simple, helped Clara regain her faith in human kindness and connection. She realized that while her life had been shattered in one place, there were still spaces in the world where she could be valued, appreciated, and cared for. Through all this, Clara's heart began to heal slowly. She discovered that solitude did not have to mean loneliness, and that independence could be empowering. The countryside taught her patience, resilience, and the beauty of simplicity. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of city life, where every moment seemed hurried and every relationship seemed fragile. Here, Clara could breathe, reflect, and grow. She began to see herself not as a victim of betrayal, but as a survivor, someone who could rebuild her life from the ground up. By the end of her first season in the countryside, Clara had transformed in subtle but profound ways. Her eyes, once filled with confusion and despair, now carried a quiet strength. Her posture, once slumped with sorrow, now held a gentle confidence. She still carried the memories of her heartbreak, but they no longer controlled her. Instead, they served as reminders of the journey she had survived and the resilience she had discovered within herself. As the leaves began to turn and autumn approached, Clara stood at the edge of her garden, looking out over the rolling fields and distant hills. The world was vast, quiet, and alive, and she felt a renewed sense of possibility. She had come to the countryside seeking escape, and in the process she had found something far more valuable: herself. Clara understood that life was not always predictable, and that heartbreak could strike without warning. But she also realized that the human spirit was capable of incredible recovery. For the first time since the wedding, Clara allowed herself to imagine the future, not one defined by the betrayal she had endured, but by the strength she had found and the new life she was building. She did not know what awaited her beyond the hills, or whether she would find companionship again, but she knew that she could face whatever came with courage. The countryside had given her the space to heal, the time to reflect, and the chance to rediscover hope. And with that hope, Clara took her first steps toward a life that was truly her own. Clara had settled into a quiet rhythm of life in the countryside. Days passed in gentle repetition, tending her garden, helping neighbors with small tasks, and exploring the rolling hills and forest paths that surrounded her little cottage. Life was simple, predictable, and healing. She had begun to feel a fragile sense of peace, the kind that comes from knowing that, at least for now, the world was gentle and calm. One morning, as the sun spilled golden light across the fields, Clara decided to walk to the far side of the village, where the field stretched out toward a distant forest. She carried a small basket to gather wildflowers, hoping to brighten the interior of her cottage. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and growing things, and the distant sound of a stream trickling over stones was comforting. She walked along a dirt road, listening to birds sing and watching the sunlight dance across the tall grass. Suddenly, the sound of hooves striking the ground caught her attention. She turned and saw a man riding a large, well-kept horse, moving steadily down the path. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed simply but neatly in clothes that suggested wealth without arrogance. His hat shaded his eyes from the sun, and his posture was straight and confident. There was a quiet strength about him, a presence that seemed to command respect without demanding it. Clara instinctively stepped back, feeling both curiosity and caution. The man's horse slowed as he approached her and he tipped his hat politely. "Good morning," he said in a warm, deep voice. "Are you new to the village?" Clara nodded, gripping her basket a little tighter. "Yes," she replied softly. "I just moved here a few weeks ago." Her voice sounded small, almost unsure even to her own ears. "I'm Thomas," the man said, extending a hand. "I live on the farm near the forest. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. It's not often we get newcomers here, and I like to make people feel welcome." His smile was gentle, genuine, and Clara felt an unfamiliar warmth in her chest. She hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand. His grip was firm but kind, and for a brief instant she felt seen, not with pity but with respect. "Thank you," she said, her voice steadier now. I'm Clara. I live in the cottage near the stream." She wasn't used to talking to strangers, especially men, without feeling nervous or guarded. But there was something about Thomas that felt different. He didn't press for more information or pry into her past. He simply acknowledged her presence and offered a simple courtesy, and that alone made her heart flutter with something she hadn't felt in a long time: ease. Thomas nodded politely. "Well, Clara, I hope you're finding life here peaceful. It's a good place to start fresh." He gave her a small, knowing smile, as if he understood without needing words. Then, with a slight tilt of his head, he continued on his horse, riding toward the fields that stretched beyond the village. Clara watched him go, feeling an odd mixture of curiosity and wonder. She couldn't explain why, but she felt as though her world had shifted just a little. The encounter lingered in her mind for days. Clara found herself thinking about the farmer with the kind eyes and calm demeanor. She replayed their brief conversation over and over, analyzing every word, every gesture. She realized that she hadn't felt nervous or ashamed in his presence, something that had been rare since the humiliation she had suffered in the city. It was strange and confusing, but also comforting. Clara began to notice small details in the village that she had overlooked before, hoping to see Thomas again, even if only for a passing greeting. A few days later, fate seemed to intervene. Clara was helping Mrs. Lawson, the elderly neighbor, repair a broken fence along her garden. The wooden planks were heavy, and Clara struggled to lift them into place. As she struggled, she heard the familiar sound of hooves approaching. Looking up, she saw Thomas riding toward her again, his expression friendly and curious. "Need a hand?" he asked, dismounting gracefully from his horse. Clara felt a surge of relief and embarrassment at the same time. "Oh, yes, please," she admitted, stepping aside. "This fence is heavier than it looks." Thomas smiled and joined her, lifting a plank with ease and positioning it carefully into place. Clara couldn't help but notice how strong he was, not just physically but in the way he carried himself, calm, patient, and capable. Together they worked side by side, sharing small talk that felt effortless. He didn't ask personal questions or pry into her past. Instead, he spoke about the farm, the weather, and the rhythms of rural life. Clara found herself relaxing, laughing softly at his light-hearted remarks, and realizing that conversation could feel natural and easy, even with someone she had only just met. As they worked, Thomas observed Clara with quiet admiration. He noticed the way she moved with determination, how she refused to give up even when the fence was stubborn, and how she approached tasks with care and attention. He had met many people in his life, but there was something different about Clara. She carried a quiet strength beneath a gentle exterior, and he found himself drawn to her resilience and kindness. He said little about it, though, content to simply be near her and witness the way she tackled each challenge. Over the next several weeks, Clara and Thomas encountered each other more often. Sometimes it was by chance, walking along a path, tending to gardens, or fetching water from the well. Other times, Thomas would intentionally seek her out, offering small tasks or sharing news of the village. With each meeting, Clara felt her heart open just a little more, though she remained cautious. The memory of betrayal was still fresh, and she knew better than to trust easily. Yet Thomas's presence was calming, steady, and respectful. He never rushed her, never demanded anything, and never made her feel like she owed him trust. One rainy afternoon, Clara found herself stranded under the eaves of an old barn, the rain pouring down around her. Thomas happened to ride by and saw her. Without hesitation, he offered her shelter under his horse's blanket and led her to a nearby shed where they could stay dry. They sat together, watching the rain fall and listening to the rhythmic sound of water dripping from the roof. Clara felt a surprising comfort in his presence. He didn't speak much, but the quiet companionship was enough. She realized that she hadn't felt truly safe or unguarded with anyone in months, and here she was, feeling at ease beside a man she had just met. It was during moments like these that Clara began to reflect on what she truly wanted from life. She had fled the city to escape heartbreak, shame, and disappointment, but in doing so, she discovered a world that offered a different kind of richness. It was not wealth or status that mattered, but kindness, integrity, and the ability to connect with others in genuine ways. Thomas embodied all of these qualities. His calm strength, patience, and respect for her boundaries made her realize that trust could be rebuilt, slowly and cautiously. As weeks turned into months, Clara and Thomas developed a rhythm of companionship. They worked together on small projects around the village, shared meals on occasion, and walked through the fields talking about life, nature, and dreams. Clara felt her walls slowly coming down, brick by brick. She still carried the scars of her past, but she also felt a spark of something new, curiosity, comfort, and the beginnings of hope. Thomas never rushed her or pushed for intimacy. He simply existed as a steady, reliable presence in her life. And that presence, more than anything else, began to heal the lingering pain in her heart. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and painted the sky with shades of pink and gold, Thomas and Clara sat on a wooden fence overlooking the fields. The air was warm, carrying the scent of fresh hay and earth. Clara felt a strange mixture of peace and nervous excitement. She realized that she looked forward to seeing him, hearing his voice, and sharing these quiet moments. She had not anticipated that someone could enter her life after such pain and bring light so gently. But here he was, changing the shape of her days with nothing more than his kindness and steady presence. In that moment, Clara understood something important. Healing was not a single event, nor was it a dramatic transformation. Healing came slowly in small steps, through moments of connection, trust, and care. Thomas had not offered grand gestures or sweeping promises. He had simply been himself, honest, patient, and kind, and in doing so, he gave Clara the space to begin trusting life again. She realized that happiness, perhaps, did not always arrive suddenly. Sometimes it crept into life quietly, like sunlight through the trees, warming the heart one ray at a time. By the time the first hints of autumn colored the leaves, Clara had grown accustomed to Thomas's presence in her life. She still valued her solitude and the quiet rhythm of her own days, but she also found joy in companionship and the simple pleasures of shared labor, laughter, and conversation. Thomas had not erased the pain of her past, nor did she expect him to, but he had shown her that trust and connection could exist again. And in that realization, Clara felt a hope she had not dared to feel in months, a hope that life could be beautiful once more, even after heartbreak. Over the following weeks, Clara found herself growing more comfortable in Thomas's presence. At first, their encounters had been brief and simple, helping a neighbor, sharing a few words as they passed each other in the fields. But gradually, those moments stretched into hours spent together, laughing, working, and talking about life. Clara began to notice small details about him that drew her in. The way he listened without judgment, how he laughed quietly but warmly, and the gentle patience with which he guided others, including her, when tasks became difficult. Thomas had a way of noticing the little things. He remembered how Clara liked her tea in the morning, how she paused to watch the birds in the trees, and how she hummed softly when she worked in the garden. These small observations, though subtle, made Clara feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. She realized that someone could notice her without expecting anything in return, and that realization stirred feelings she had long buried under grief and mistrust. For the first time, she began to consider that companionship didn't have to bring heartache. It could bring comfort, warmth, and even joy. The two of them often worked together on Thomas's farm. Clara helped him tend the fields, repair fences, and care for the animals. At first, the tasks were purely practical, but over time, their cooperation began to feel like something more. There was a rhythm in the way they worked side by side, a silent understanding that made even the hardest tasks easier. Thomas never rushed Clara, but he was always near, offering guidance or encouragement when she needed it. She appreciated that he treated her as an equal, never condescending, never demanding, but always willing to share the load. As the days grew longer and the sun warmed the countryside, Clara and Thomas began to share more of their lives with one another. They spoke of childhood memories, dreams for the future, and the little joys and frustrations of daily life. Thomas told Clara about his late wife, the love he had shared, and the grief he had endured. His openness inspired Clara to share her own story, not all at once but in fragments. She spoke of her life in the city, the wedding that had ended in heartbreak, and the decision to escape to the countryside. Each time she shared a piece of her past, Thomas listened without interruption or judgment, nodding with understanding and offering gentle reassurance. One cool autumn morning, Clara found herself in the orchard, helping Thomas gather apples from the trees. The air smelled of ripe fruit and earth, and the sunlight filtered through the leaves in warm, golden shafts. As they worked, Thomas glanced at her and said softly, "Clara, I admire your courage. You've been through so much, yet you're here, facing each day with strength and grace. It's remarkable." Clara felt her cheeks flush at his words. Praise had always felt uncomfortable to her, but Thomas's voice carried no judgment, only sincerity. She looked down at the apples in her hands, pretending to focus on them, but inside, her heart was quietly buoyed. She realized that she was beginning to value his opinion and presence in her life more than she had anticipated. She didn't want to admit it just yet, but a small warmth had begun to grow inside her, one that felt like the first flicker of trust and hope in months. The bond between them deepened not just through work, but through shared moments of quiet companionship. On chilly evenings, they would sit by a small fire in Thomas's barn, sipping tea and watching the flames dance. They spoke of everything and nothing, sometimes about the weather, other times about stories from their pasts or dreams for the future. Clara found comfort in these moments, realizing that she could enjoy someone's company without fear, without feeling vulnerable in a way that left her exposed. Thomas had a calming effect on her, and in turn, her presence seemed to soothe him as well. Thomas, too, began to notice changes in himself. He had lived alone for years, focused on his farm and the responsibilities of managing his land. Loneliness had been a constant companion, and he had accepted it as part of life. But Clara's presence brought a subtle shift. Her laughter, her quiet strength, and the ease with which she handled both work and sorrow began to fill spaces in his heart he hadn't realized were empty. He admired her independence, yet he wanted to protect her, to offer support without overwhelming her. It was a delicate balance, one he navigated carefully, aware of the fragility of trust. As autumn deepened, their connection grew through small, meaningful gestures. Thomas would bring Clara fresh bread from the bakery or a basket of vegetables from the farm, and she would leave him tea by the barn door in the morning. They began sharing meals together, simple but satisfying, sitting side by side and talking as the sun set over the fields. There was a rhythm to their lives that felt natural, unforced, and profoundly comforting. Clara began to feel that she was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to live again, even if cautiously. One crisp afternoon, as Clara helped Thomas repair a section of the barn roof, a sudden gust of wind threatened to knock a plank loose. Without thinking, Thomas grabbed her hand to steady her. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and neither moved immediately. It was an ordinary gesture, born of concern and instinct, yet the silence between them carried a depth of unspoken emotion. Clara felt her heart quicken, a mixture of fear and excitement swirling within her. She realized that she was beginning to care for Thomas in a way she had not expected, and that realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Despite the growing closeness, Clara remained cautious. She reminded herself that her past heartbreak had left deep scars, and that trusting someone again was not something she could do lightly. She valued her independence and the life she had built in the countryside, and she was determined not to lose herself in feelings too quickly. Yet she couldn't deny the subtle changes in her heart, the way she looked forward to seeing Thomas, the warmth that spread through her when he smiled, and the quiet comfort she felt in his presence. Thomas seemed to understand her cautious nature without her needing to explain it. He never pressured her, never rushed her, and never expected more than she was willing to give. Instead, he offered a steady companionship, patience, and a quiet encouragement that allowed her to open up on her own terms. Clara came to realize that this was the essence of trust, not grand promises or declarations, but the simple, consistent presence of someone who respected and valued you, flaws and all. One evening, as they walked along a forest path lined with golden leaves, Clara turned to Thomas and said softly, "I never thought I'd feel safe again. I mean, after everything, I thought I'd always be careful, always guarded. But with you, it's different." Thomas looked at her, his expression gentle but serious. "Clara, you've been through so much. I don't expect you to trust easily, and I don't want to rush you. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere unless you want me to leave." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes, not from sadness but from relief. Finally, someone was offering her patience, respect, and understanding in a way she had not known existed. She nodded quietly, feeling a mixture of gratitude, affection, and a spark of hope she had not dared to feel in months. As the days turned into weeks, their bond continued to strengthen. They shared small joys, collecting eggs from the hens, watching the sunrise over the fields, and preparing simple meals together. Clara began to feel a sense of belonging she had not known since leaving the city. She realized that love could be gentle, patient, and nurturing, and that it didn't have to come with fear, judgment, or pain. Thomas had shown her that connection could exist alongside independence, and that a caring partnership could bring strength rather than weakness. By the time winter approached, Clara knew that her feelings for Thomas had grown deeper than she had expected. She found herself thinking of him when they were apart, smiling at the memory of his quiet humor, the way he listened so attentively, and the calm reassurance he provided without ever needing to say much. She still carried the scars of her past, but she had also discovered a capacity for trust, affection, and hope that she had believed lost. Thomas, too, had come to care for Clara in ways he had not anticipated. Her presence had brought light into his life, softening the edges of loneliness and grief that he had carried for years. He admired her resilience, her courage, and the gentle strength she displayed every day. He realized that he had found in Clara not just a companion, but someone who complemented his life, challenged him to grow, and brought joy to his days in a way he had not thought possible. In the quiet evenings, as snow began to dust the fields and the wind whispered through the trees, Clara and Thomas would sit together by the fire, sharing stories, laughter, and moments of comfortable silence. Their bond had grown beyond mere friendship, built on mutual respect, patience, and shared experiences. It was a connection that felt enduring, steady, and deeply meaningful, a promise of something lasting without needing to be spoken aloud. Clara understood now that healing did not mean forgetting the past or pretending the pain had never existed. It meant opening her heart slowly, learning to trust again, and allowing herself to feel joy, comfort, and love once more. And in Thomas, she had found someone who could walk beside her in that journey, not as a savior, but as a partner, steady and kind, who respected her history and cherished her presence. As winter slowly gave way to spring, Clara felt a sense of anticipation in the air, not just from the changing season, but from the life she was beginning to embrace. The countryside, once a quiet refuge where she had come to heal from heartbreak, had transformed into a place of hope and possibility. The snow had melted, leaving the fields rich and green, and the days grew warmer, filled with the hum of life returning to the land. Clara felt that life, like the earth itself, was opening up to new beginnings. She had spent the past months working alongside Thomas, helping tend his farm, care for the animals, and repair structures that had been neglected during harsh winters. Their partnership had grown beyond friendship, woven through shared work, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. There was a rhythm to their days now, a harmony that neither had expected but both had come to cherish. Clara realized that she looked forward to the mornings when Thomas would greet her with a warm smile, and the evenings when they would sit by the fire together, sharing stories and dreams. Clara's confidence in herself had grown alongside her affection for Thomas. She had discovered strength she hadn't known existed, the ability to manage responsibilities on the farm, the patience to nurture plants and animals, and the resilience to face challenges without fear. But more importantly, she had learned to trust again, not blindly, but carefully, with an understanding that trust was a choice, nurtured day by day. Thomas had become a steady presence in her life, someone who respected her independence while offering support and companionship. One bright spring morning, Thomas invited Clara to walk with him along a trail leading to a small hill overlooking the fields. The sun was warm on their faces, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. Clara felt a flutter of excitement, wondering why he had asked her to join him at this time. As they reached the top of the hill, Thomas stopped and turned to her, his expression soft and sincere. "Clara," he said quietly, "these past months with you have been remarkable. I've come to care for you deeply, more than I ever expected. You've brought light, warmth, and joy into my life in ways I can't describe. I want to spend my life with you, not because you need me, but because I want to be with you." Clara's heart swelled with emotion. She felt tears prick at her eyes, not from sadness, but from a deep, overwhelming sense of gratitude and love. She had never imagined that after the pain she had endured, she could feel this way again, safe, cherished, and truly seen. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Thomas, I never thought I could trust someone like this again. You've shown me kindness, patience, and respect. You've helped me see that life can still be beautiful even after heartbreak. I care for you too." A quiet joy settled over them, stronger than words. They stood together on the hill, holding hands, feeling the warmth of the sun and the gentle rhythm of the countryside around them. In that moment, Clara understood that she had not just found love, but a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared strength. She had survived heartbreak and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the happiness that life offered. Their life together unfolded naturally, without rush or pressure. Clara moved into Thomas's farmhouse permanently, bringing her small belongings and planting her own little garden near the edge of the property. The house, once quiet and lonely, became filled with laughter, warmth, and the small joys of everyday life. They cooked meals together, tended the animals, repaired fences, and worked the fields, sharing both labor and companionship. Each day strengthened their bond, not through grand gestures, but through consistent care, patience, and understanding. Clara found herself appreciating the small, meaningful details of life with Thomas. She loved the way he noticed the changing seasons, the way he remembered the names of the villagers and the stories of the children in the village. She admired his dedication to the farm, his quiet integrity, and the gentle kindness he extended to everyone around him. Thomas, in turn, admired Clara's strength, her resilience, and the way she brought warmth and light to the home and farm. They supported one another in ways that felt effortless, as if their lives had been waiting to intersect for years. One spring afternoon, as they worked together in the orchard, Clara looked at Thomas and smiled. "I never imagined life could feel this full," she said softly. Thomas glanced at her, his eyes reflecting the sunlight, and nodded. "Neither did I," he admitted. "But you've shown me that happiness can grow slowly, quietly, and yet feel profound when it arrives. You've made me believe in joy again." Their days were filled with simple pleasures, walking through fields at dawn, sharing tea by the window, listening to the birds sing, and watching the sky turn brilliant shades of pink and orange at sunset. Clara had learned that love was not just in the extraordinary moments, but in the ordinary, everyday acts of kindness, patience, and care. Each shared meal, each repaired fence, and each quiet conversation strengthened the bond between them. Though they had found love, Clara never forgot the journey that had brought her here. She carried her past heartbreak with her, not as a burden, but as a reminder of her resilience and strength. She had learned that life could be unpredictable, that people could disappoint, and that sometimes the pain seemed unbearable. But she had also learned that healing, trust, and love were possible, even after betrayal. Thomas had not erased her past, but he had helped her see that the future could still hold beauty, joy, and connection. As summer approached, their relationship blossomed further. Neighbors and villagers came to know them as a pair, a partnership built on mutual respect and affection. Children ran past the farm laughing, farmers waved as they worked in the fields, and the community embraced them as part of the village's heartbeat. Clara felt a deep sense of belonging she had never known in the city. Here, She was valued not for appearances or expectations, but for who she was: strong, kind, and capable. And in Thomas, she had found someone who cherished her in the same way. One quiet evening, as the sun set behind the hills and the sky turned a brilliant shade of gold, Clara and Thomas sat together on the porch, holding hands and watching the fields stretch into the horizon. The air was warm, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and fresh earth. Clara rested her head against Thomas's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat and the comforting presence of his arms around her. She realized that she had finally found the home she had been searching for, not just in a place, but in a person who understood, supported, and loved her unconditionally. "Thomas," she said softly, "I never thought I'd find this peace, trust, and love again. But with you, I feel like I can face anything." Thomas smiled, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Clara, life hasn't always been easy, and we've both known loss and pain, but together we've built something strong, something real. I promise to be here with you through every season, every challenge, and every joy." Clara felt a tear slide down her cheek, not from sadness, but from a deep, overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had come so far, from heartbreak and abandonment to healing, trust, and love. The journey had not been simple, and the scars of her past would always remain, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they reminded her of her courage, resilience, and the strength it took to open her heart again. In the months that followed, Clara and Thomas continued to grow together, sharing both work and life. They celebrated small victories, harvests that were bountiful, repaired fences that had been neglected for years, and the laughter of children playing in the fields. They shared quiet evenings by the fire, watching the flames dance and reflecting on the lives they had rebuilt together. Each day was a testament to their patience, understanding, and mutual care. Clara's transformation was not just emotional, but also practical. She became confident in managing responsibilities on the farm, making decisions, and handling challenges with calm determination. Thomas admired this growth, not as a partner's duty, but as a reflection of the woman he had come to love deeply. Together, they faced each day with cooperation, respect, and shared purpose, proving that love was not only about passion, but about partnership, patience, and unwavering support. As the seasons turned once more, Clara looked around the farm, the fields full of crops, the animals healthy, the house warm and welcoming, and realized that she had finally found what she had been seeking all along. She had come to the countryside to escape heartbreak, and in doing so, she had found a life richer than she could have imagined. She had found love, trust, companionship, and a sense of purpose. And most importantly, she had found herself, strong, resilient, and capable of both giving and receiving love fully. In the quiet evenings, as the sky turned soft shades of pink and gold, and the air was filled with the gentle sounds of the countryside, Clara often reflected on her journey. She remembered the pain of being abandoned at the altar, the fear and loneliness that had followed, and the courage it had taken to leave everything behind and start anew. She also remembered the joy, trust, and love that Thomas had brought into her life, and the quiet, steady way he had helped her rebuild her heart. Clara realized that life, with all its unpredictability, heartbreak, and challenges, could also bring beauty, healing, and love. She had learned that even after deep pain, happiness was possible. She had discovered that trust could be earned slowly, that companionship could be gentle and patient, and that love could grow quietly, steadily, and profoundly. And in Thomas, she had found the person who could walk beside her through all the seasons of life, hand in hand, heart to heart. Looking toward the horizon, Clara felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. The countryside, the farm, and Thomas's steady presence had given her a life filled with purpose, joy, and love. She had been abandoned once, hurt deeply, and forced to start over. But in the process, she had discovered her own strength, resilience, and capacity for happiness. And now, with Thomas by her side, she knew that the future held promise, stability, and love. A life she could embrace fully, without fear, without hesitation, and with a heart open to all the joys yet to come.